Welcome to the Steve and Caleb Show. My name is Caleb.
And my name is Steve. Here we like to talk about politics and current events from a perspective of liberty.
Oftentimes our opinions make both Republicans and Democrats uncomfortable.
Let's dive in.
We are live. This is Caleb, and I'm here without Steve. He is currently gone for work, and this will happen periodically, so every so often we'll have an episode like this. A lot of you have actually asked to hear a little more about my opinion, so hopefully this fills that void. So today we are going to talk about Republicans. I am a registered Republican. I am a libertarian, though, as you are all aware. I originally chose to be a registered Republican back when I was about 19. I thought it was my duty to advocate for gun rights, freedom of speech rights, and even smaller government. Turns out Republican politicians and even its voter base is farther away from this than I originally thought. So I'm going to dive in on why I'm against being labeled as a Republican lately. In fact, a lot of Republicans turned libertarians are in the same boat as me. I'm sure you have seen the abundance of JoJo 2020 memes, and it's overwhelming how many people are diving into her political campaign. So let's dive in and figure this out. I have 4 points. In 4 points, I'm going to try and explain and maybe convince you why the Republicans should make these corrections. All right, so point number 1. Republicans are more focused on patriotism than legislation. Okay, so for example, Dan Crenshaw, he's an American hero. There's no denial in that. But people are so consumed with the fact that he's a Navy SEAL and that he's an American hero that they just don't care that he wants stricter gun laws. He's an open advocate for stricter background checks and red flag laws. Don't believe me? Look it up. Then Republicans stroke his belly while, feeding him an excessive amount of praises, telling him how happy they are that he's in a political position in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong, on other issues, he's outstanding. But that shouldn't be reason enough to compromise our Second Amendment values, right? Shall not be infringed. Well, unless you're a Republican and Navy SEAL congressman, then we'll tolerate infringement, I guess. And if that's not enough to get your mind gears turning, then what about all the Republicans that voted on the Patriot Act, for example? The act that allows the government to spy on you? The Patriot Act violates the Constitution in several ways. I would need an individual podcast just to cover it all. It violates the Fourth Amendment and it violates the First Amendment, to put it into oversimplified terms. Republicans were cool with it, and you, the voters, are cash money with it. Super cool with it. You still vote in the same people who voted on it because it's better to vote for them than it is to lose to a Democrat. I don't understand. And this leads me to my second point. Republicans love being called sheepdogs. Sheepdogs being the protectors of the defenseless, also known as sheep. The sheep being the liberals who, don't want to keep themselves armed. I mean, I get that. I agree that people who are defenseless are sheep. Okay. Anyways, what kind of sheepdog allows their sheep to be preyed on by the government? Not a good one. The most frustrating thing to people like myself, people who take warrior readiness seriously and take proper skepticism seriously, have to stand by while people claim to be sheepdogs. They submit to terrible leadership, and I hate calling it leadership. Also, I would like to take this time to explain that just because you take a 12-gauge shotgun to a Coke can once a year doesn't make you a sheepdog. Maintaining proper vigilance of a government's actions and having a healthy amount of skepticism is what makes a good sheepdog. Maintaining a warrior readiness of physical competence and a great understanding of stress shooting makes a good sheepdog. In fact, the best gunfighting warrior-like shooters that I know personally, they're not Republicans. They're usually libertarians. But that's besides the point. We need Republicans to hold their politicians accountable when they try to execute gun restrictions. Trump has executed more gun control than Obama ever did, but it's always swept under the rug. I'll give the man credit for the economy. I'd be a fool not to. But why can't we hold him accountable with his views on the Second Amendment? Mind-boggling. Anyways, bad sheepdogs. Third point, Republicans are only pro-life when it comes to unborn children. So, for example, I was on Facebook earlier this week and I stumbled across a picture. It was from a Republican, and they posted this picture that made fun of and sort of glorified running over protesters that block a roadway. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd be lying if I said that, that thought would never cross my mind if I was running late for work. But if you'd actually do that, you are essentially saying that causing you inconvenience on a roadway is worth killing someone. Which leads into my point, Republicans are only pro-life with unborn children. Life is sacred for all people, even those that break the law and block a street. Whenever I see someone challenge these people on why they are wanting to run over people, their response is always, well, they're breaking the law. Okay, so you're saying that when people break the law, we should just kill them? Break the law? Death to you. I couldn't disagree more. Life is sacred, and most pro-lifers are Christians to some extent. So, to some extent, pro-lifers believe in heaven and hell, right? So hypothetically speaking, if you plow into a group of protesters, blocking the street, sending some to their death, there is a chance you're sending someone to hell. That's not Christ-like of anyone. That's not pro-life of anyone. Your pro-life card that you like to flash to people, yeah, I'm taking that, I'm ripping it up, and I'm throwing it in the trash because it's garbage. Now, the final point is, the Republicans are lacking a lot of empathy lately. I wish we could have avoided the entire George Floyd incident by the cop, being properly trained and just not killing him. But it happened. But I think we could have avoided the entire demise of Minneapolis. Look, I get it. A lot of stats and numbers don't necessarily support the fact that black people are as suppressed as they might believe. But that doesn't really matter. If a certain group feels extremely upset, maybe we could listen. Maybe we could be like, hey, I don't agree, so I'm hoping you can explain to me why you feel this way, instead of putting up a wall every time a snowflake liberal even mentions white privilege. Maybe listening and being empathetic would help. I'm not saying to bow down and submit to their every demand. That's just ridiculous. I'm not saying to pay reparations or tear down every single statue of any single person that ever did anything racist. I'm just saying when you deal with angry people, it helps to de-escalate the situation. The best way to do this is called empathy. Swallowing your pride and trying to understand, or at least give off the perception of it. Look, guys, if you even made it through this podcast without turning it off this far in anger, I am glad. I wanted to provide information that can lead to a prosperous nation rather than leading to an ultra-biased political stage show. One of the reasons Democrats are so strong when they come together is they listen to each other. They hear each other out. When I try to talk to a Republican about my opinions, I usually get a really strong-willed argument instead of just being like, yeah, man, that's a good point, and I'll think about that. It's always immediate debates. Always debates. Everyone thinks they are Ben Shapiro and can, what does he say? Destroy. I will destroy you with facts. Everybody thinks they're Ben Shapiro and can destroy anyone who has a liberating idea. I think it needs to stop. And Republicans as a whole need to embrace liberty rather than politicians who are obviously against it. All right, now that I went on my little tangent, I'm going to go over some news that maybe you guys may not even be aware of. I don't know why, but I think Facebook's they might be suppressing this. They may not be. Perhaps people just aren't even sharing it. But I'm going to share this with you. So anyways, recently a couple has been put under house arrest after testing positive for COVID-19. Unreal. Listen, every single skeptic I know said this was going to happen when this whole coronavirus thing started. Like as soon as the whole mask thing, government mandates, like everybody's like, yep, this is going to happen. People are going to be put on house arrest. It's inevitable. And turns out they were right. I was right. We were all right. So let me read this off to you. A Kentucky couple is under house arrest after one of them tested positive for coronavirus and refused to sign self-quarantine papers. Elizabeth got tested for COVID-19 because she was planning to go visit her parents. She quotes, "My grandparents wanted to see me too, so just to make sure that, if I tested negative, that they would be okay. Everything would be fine." End quote. Now, after testing positive, but without showing any symptoms. She said the health department contacted her requesting that she sign the documents. And she quotes, "I agreed to comply to call the health department if I was to go. I was to call the health department if I was to leave my house for any reason," she said, end quote. But she chose not to sign. And quote, "I had gotten a message from them, a text message that stated, because of your refusal to sign, this is going to be escalated and law enforcement will be involved," end quote. So later that week, the county sheriff greeted her husband, Isaiah, at their front door. He quotes, "I open up the door and there's like 8 different people, 5 different cars, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? This guy's in a suit with the mask. It's the health department guy. And they have 3 papers for us, for me, her, and my daughter," he said, end quote. The couple was ordered to wear ankle monitors. If they even traveled more than 200 feet, law enforcement would be notified. You know, these people, they didn't rob a store, they didn't steal something, they didn't hit and run, they didn't do anything wrong. They just refused to sign a piece of paper from the health department. Not even from the cops. The piece of paper isn't a piece of paper, given by the police for the police. It's from the health department. The couple said that they never denied self-quarantining. They weren't like, yeah, we're not even quarantining. No, they just said they're not going to sign it. I wouldn't have signed it. Are you kidding me? They just didn't agree with the wording of the documents. And that's exactly what the director of the public health department told the judge, that they were refusing to self-quarantine. Unreal. They never said that. Never said that. Now, they said even without the ankle monitor, they had planned to be cautious, and if she had needed medical care, she would have let healthcare workers know she was infected with the virus. But she didn't need medical care. She wasn't showing any symptoms. She was fine. She would have stayed home, maybe gone on a walk, maybe go on a run. But now they can't. Now she can't. They all have ankle monitors. Unreal. This is going on right now in our country. See, talking earlier about how, all these issues I have with Republicans lately, where are the Republicans during this? And I'm not talking about the ones that complain and tweet. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where's President Trump during this? Where's President Trump? He needs to say, hey guys, this is wrong. I digress. Now let's talk about Florida. So a local Fox news station, I believe it was Fox 35, they were asking the health official whether 2 coronavirus victims who were in their 20s had any underlying conditions. Because, when we were first introduced to this virus, people who were young didn't really get this virus, and if they did, they definitely didn't die, and if they ever did, it was because they had horrible underlying conditions. So naturally, the news channel asked if they had underlying conditions. Well, when they asked, guess what they found out? And I quote, "The first one didn't have any. He died in a motorcycle accident," end quote. That was from Dr. Pino. And he was asked if the man's data was ever removed. That seems like perfect sense. Remove the data that doesn't coagulate well with the rest of the data. But he quotes, "I don't think so. I have to double check." Really? You don't know? That seems like a pretty big piece of information to not know. Quote, "We are arguing, discussing, or trying to argue with the state, not because of the numbers. It's 100. It doesn't make any difference if it's 99. But the fact that the individual didn't die from COVID-19 died in the crash. But you could actually argue that it could have been the COVID-19 that caused him to crash. I don't know the conclusion of that one," end quote. Okay, so these people, I need to take a deep breath. So these people are trying to convince you and I that a person in their 20s who died on a motorcycle crash could have been caused by COVID-19. They actually want to have an argument that it very could have possibly been a COVID-19 related death. You've got to be kidding me. Now, this states that there are still 2 people in their 20s on Orange County's death data list for coronavirus deaths. So obviously he's not removed. And this is just astounding. Look, we are literally ruining people's lives. Now, when I say ruining people's lives, I'm not talking about like myself. For example, I didn't go to work for like 2 months. it was no big deal. I mean, I have enough money to live, but some people don't. And when I say some people don't, I'm not talking about the people who just didn't prepare for the worst and didn't save. We can point to them and say, you know what, they just don't prepare well. I'm talking about business owners, people who employ other people. I believe it is small businesses that employ most of our country. You've got to be kidding me. And we're putting them out of business. We're putting these jobs in the garbage because of inflated numbers. We all knew they were inflated. I don't care who you are, what job you do. I mean, there were so many people trying to convince me that the numbers weren't inflated. They were actually underflated. Is that the correct terminology? That they were underevaluated. When in fact, we see a motorcycle accident on a COVID-19 death count. And not just any death count, but a death count for those under 20 years, not under 20 years old, about 20 years old. That is significant. There are so few COVID-19 deaths within that age range. Adding one incorrect COVID-19 death shoots the chart into a bell curve that you don't want to see. You've got to be kidding me. So here we are shutting people's lives down, making people go broke. I know people who, they're missing car payments because they lost their job. And these places that are taking the car payments are telling them, don't worry, we'll put you on a deferment plan. It'll be fine. It won't hit your credit. Well, it's hitting people's credit. I don't care what they say. It's hitting people's credit. It's tearing apart lives because of lying. Don't get me wrong. COVID-19 is real. I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not one of those plandemic people, even though I am a huge skeptic of a lot of government things, but this is actually not one of them. But I do think that the government is taking this and they are manipulating it. Health officials around the globe are causing justification for their jobs. That's really what they're doing. They're giving themselves a justification for why they are hired. They're all over it. Their Facebook pages have gone from 10 likes, 10 follows in a city of 20,000 people to now 5,000 likes, 5,000 followers. They are finally being justified. Now, I'm not saying that they have no use before this, but after this, their role has increased. The need or the perception of need, they're manipulating it. How do you people not see this? Now, don't get me wrong. I will wear a mask when I go to the store if the store requires it, even if they don't require it. If I feel like I'm the only one there that doesn't have one, I'll wear one. Personally, I think it's a little exaggerated, but that doesn't matter because I'm still going to respect people. I think it's real. But you expect me to take this so seriously when your own officials are lying. You expect me to take this seriously when somebody literally has the audacity to tell me COVID-19 started or caused a motorcycle accident? You've got to be kidding me. Now, speaking of Florida, the numbers keep going back and forth, but anywhere from around 20 to a little above 30 Florida labs were caught cheating the COVID-19 books by showing 100% positive test results from everyone testing, when in reality it was more around 9.4%. So how are we supposed to take this seriously? And get this, in Rhode Island, they received 113 false positive COVID-19 test results from a private lab in, guess where? New York. So, the numbers, every day there are new articles about how numbers are being cooked and skewed. And you're telling me that we may even have a second shutdown. But don't get me wrong. That extra $1,200, $2,400, oh, that'll do it. That's great hush money right there. Oh, by the way, that money was originally mine in the first place. That was taken from me to give back to me for shutting me down, for making this to where I can't pay a car payment. Now, for those of you listening, I was able to make all my payments. But for other people who maybe aren't so lucky, who maybe had to, crack open the piggy bank before this all happened, and then when this happened, they're left hanging high and dry. I just don't get it. Now, obviously, this news doesn't shock anybody, unfortunately. So anyways, thanks for tuning in this week. Steve will be back next week for our normal liberty-based conversations. So expect a normal episode next week. All right, see you guys.